You're listening to The Valley Current.
Let's turn for a second to your new invention, because you are familiar with Ebola and viruses, and you are doing some thinking in an area that's very hot right now, which is this Covid-19 and its variants, plural. You've listened to a few of the podcasts, I think you have, with Dr. Hayflick, who is a virologist, and who I at some point, because I think you two would hit it off immensely. And
I could not agree with him more.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I couldn't agree with him more.
Tell me more about your thinking about your current inventiveness on what we should do about this virus, because I know you're thinking along the lines of helping society, and you're still an inventor in part, and you're thinking all the time. But tell me what your current, I think you did file something recently, right?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about it.
I did. For the only reason, because I filed a patent. It's a specific generic drug, and nobody's going to make any money on it. Okay. I'm not going to make any money on it. Right. It's generic. It's a long-standing drug, for instance, and it's used for a different purpose. It goes back to the thinking. We all think in different ways, but you think in a way that you try to make connections. I try to make connections in associations. Right. And if I find an association that I cannot explain, I'd like to explain it. Right. Because it may lead me to something. If you recall the breast implant, I was a general surgeon first, a vascular surgeon, and a general surgeon. And I dealt with these Gore-Tex grafts and all these vascular grafts. Right. And when it was an issue of silicone breast implants, So from the idea of how, you see, the issue with breast implants was that they were getting hard in a very high proportion of cases when they were inserted, almost in some cases 90% of the time, which is not a minor thing. And you can see it, when you look at a woman, you can see how hard they are, even for just watching it, because they look like balls. Right. And they don't look like breasts. They don't move in a natural way. So basically, I was looking for why is that? And at that time, there were the theory was either it's a reason by infection or because silicone leaks out of those implants, and that causes an inflammation and so on and so forth. Right. But I said at the time, which was the invention in essence, was it really is nothing to do with what the implant is. It's not about the inside of the prosthesis, about what it's made of or anything like that. That was the hypothesis or the idea. The idea was it has simply to do with the surface properties of what it is. The surface properties are more important. It's what the body sees. It's not, the body doesn't see the inside of a silicone prosthesis. The body sees the outside. Right. And the body responds to that. Right. And there's a whole way of logic. By the way, to this day, many plastic surgeons still not buying it after it's been proven definitively that is so. But so be it. Yeah. The bottom line is that, so from that idea of vascular implants, vascular prosthesis, arteries and veins and things that are made from Gore-Tex that are still being done today, and long history of safety in the human body. That was the key for me. Safety. Right. They would last forever and they're safe. And that was that is, by the way, that art is also the basis for drug distribution devices, because if you put any prosthetic implantable device, it doesn't matter what it is, a pacemaker, anything, the body sees the surface of that prosthetic. And drug distribution devices are, something subcutaneously when you put them under the skin and so on. And also for tissue regeneration. Right. Nowadays, when people are doing tissue regeneration, they have a scaffold. Right. And the way that the scaffold is built, it has to be built on the principles of the surface of the scaffold, or any implantable, which was I described it as a rough rough textured surface.
Right.
Rough. It had so that so tissue can ingrow into it,
right.
and so on, and the body will not encapsulate it and try to get rid of it.
Right. It's like a Velcro. It's like a Velcro connection. It's like the Velcro in your winter jacket, right? Those little pins all latched together. But did you have an idea that you recently filed on, just generically describing, where the future will be some sort of constant distribution to fight off viruses, like the idea of What I did was, and that had nothing to do with the original idea. Mm-hmm. As a plastic surgeon, I had one fear doing surgery, and that was that my patient will end up having a blood clot, right?
A lethal one, lethal one. And if you've ever seen one, and I saw one when I was training as a resident, I swore to myself, it's not a pretty sight.
Oh.
And I swore to myself, and I was just training at the time. I was a resident. I said to myself, I will not, if I ever, graduate and all the rest of it, I will never want to see this again, ever again.
Right.
And it's sudden, the person just drops.
Yes.
And you don't expect it, and it's like,
right.
It's too hard to describe.
Yes.
And I made a decision. And one of the things that I did a lot of was body contouring surgery, tummy tucks and liposuction, all these other things. I did everything basically. Yes. But that was one of the things, and that is where there's a high probability of blood clots. The only surgery in plastic surgery where you can get blood clots on pretty regular basis is tummy tucks.
Yes.
And we've heard about high profile cases where women just die after having that surgery.
Yes.
Because it's pretty invasive in certain ways, and it predisposes, and I saw it as a predisposing, not just me, but others also, we saw it as a predisposing to blood clots. So my solution for that was that I would do all these cases under local anesthesia with sedation, not general anesthesia.
Right.
Okay. Because to me, general anesthesia was the major culprit. And I mean, there were other culprits in tummy tucks, but that was the major culprit. Right. So I worked really hard my entire career, and which was this is where I'm not trying to promote myself, but some other people share my idea, but not the majority. Mm-hmm. And around the world, and I found a way for myself to do long body contouring surgeries, 6 hours, sometimes 7 hours, or even 8 hours surgeries.
Yes.
Under sedation, without supplementary oxygen, and without intubation. Now think about it. Mm-hmm. Here's the connection. What are we trying to do with COVID?
Right.
That's exactly what their recommendations were. Don't intubate them, and that's it. And give them some supplementary oxygen. Okay, I did not. It was harder without. Yes. But it's the same principle. How do you keep someone sedated for a long period of time without intubating them?
Right.
And doing surgery is painful.
Yes.
So major surgery and hours of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where it came from. So one of the things that I noticed, which some anesthesiologists and some people who CRNAs and anesthesiologists that I know have confirmed, is that there's a certain population, which is the Black and brown population in the United States, that is basically prone to hypersecretion, mucus hypersecretion. We had trouble putting these people to sleep. I had trouble putting these people to sleep because they would have so much mucus coming out. They would have like half a liter of mucus sometimes that you couldn't even lay them down. They were choking on their secretions.
Yes.
Think about it again. What are we talking about? Isn't it similar to COVID? They have enormous number of secretions. They're wet lung.
Yes.
And then I started investigating it more seriously in my connections. And this is where, I'm not going to go into all the details of it. Yes. Because, it just becomes too technical. But the bottom line is that when you look at the Black and brown population, everybody, they have a predisposition or vulnerability to COVID. We know that. And that has been explained on socioeconomic grounds. Okay. And, it's because of socioeconomic circumstances that they're more prone to it, the jobs and density of population, all the rest of it. Nobody says that they're biologically predisposed to it.
Right.
And guess what? If you look at the literature, at all the literature, there are many studies that show that population that has a vulnerability to ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is part of COVID, obviously, and which is also part of many other things that happen, to people when they're very sick. And that population is very prone to that and is very vulnerable and has a much higher mortality, morbidity rate from that.
Right.
And you say to yourself, why isn't it connected?
Mm-hmm.
You need to connect the fact that they have the vulnerability. They also have a vulnerability to asthma and various other respiratory diseases. It's just genetic.
Yes.
And the next thought, which is even, I think, is, first of all, why? And I was looking for the connections. And the second thing is that isn't it possible, just possible, that if you start investigating along those lines, you would find something for a disease like COVID, where you can not just a disease like COVID, but any viral disease,
right? Because
they're very common and they have a lot in common, and so this is what I was thinking about, and this is where the thinking is gone. And so I can continue on and on and on and on, but that's a connection. And it's possible that the entire population has some vulnerabilities, but they're just more expressed in the Black and brown population because genetic factors. That's all.
Right.
And you cannot say that it's just socioeconomic, that more Black and brown people have more severe COVID, are more prone to getting it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. But, we're so politically correct, we're so PC that no one is willing other than you to say, look, this is not necessarily about socioeconomic status. This is actually a genetic situation, because everyone's like, oh, you're making it sound like the Blacks and browns are not as strong as the whites, and that's politically incorrect. But if it's a scientific fact, it's a scientific fact. It's like you have to say what's there as a scientist and not be worried about being challenged as being politically incorrect. And, I've had a number of people come on the podcast saying, in this world of being politically correct, we're kind of losing sight of being good scientists or being good observers of what the actual facts are, because we get biased by the media that wants to be politically correct in so many ways. The liberal media and even the conservative media wants to be politically correct in their own ways. And that may be destroying the strength of the scientific observations that need to occur, including on something that's as challenging as COVID-19 and its variants, which obviously seem to be with us now for a while, and maybe are going to be with us for a much longer while longer. And that's a question. That's a final question I have for you, because we're running a bit out of time. Do you think we're going to face a constant challenge of these variants going forward, or do you think we'll be lucky?
Yeah, look, as Dr. Hayfield was saying, these are mutations.
Right.
What it is. And I look at it in the same way. We've had coronaviruses before. They're what is really interesting to me is all this thing that, oh wow, this is something new that we have to learn about. Of course, it's something new that you have to learn about because it's more virulent.
Right.
That's it.
Yes.
And maybe more infectious.
Yes.
That's it. But
Yes.
But viruses that give us influenza and colds, many of them are coronaviruses, have been around, SARS, and all these other viruses. We have problems with antiviral medications because they're much more difficult. I mean, we've to a degree found a way to get around bacterial infections, but that only goes back to World War II.
Right.
When we started using penicillin properly.
Right.
So no, we need to find a way to deal with viral infection, and we also need medications that are non-specific.
Right.
And safe. So my proposal was of one medication that, for example, it's just an example because you can go into it much more in detail, that will help anyone with any viral infection, especially COVID.
Right.
And it's easy to do because that medication is widely available and is safe. It has been used for years and years and years. But all it takes is for anyone who is running a COVID intensive care to give that medication, and they can because it's approved for those kinds of uses, by the way. But you can't get anyone to do it because we're living in an era of evidence. And if you notice that even all those recommendations about COVID, they have to do a study and they have to do this and that. Nobody wants to extrapolate or go back to things that we know are so, that we know because they've been proven a million times before, let's say on another virus. You need to extrapolate. You need to look at the prior experience, at the history of what you've been doing, because medicine was not born 10 years ago when evidence-based medicine was born.
Right. Right.
We've always, medicine has been around for thousands of years, and most of the time people connected. This is how the big inventions in medicine occurred. The smallpox vaccination, for example, from the cowpox that was observed. These are observations that people made, and they took it one step further. Or even this pandemic. When you look at the previous pandemic, in early in the 20th century, the big flu epidemic.
Yeah.
People were wearing masks.
Yes.
They knew nothing about viruses, but they were wearing masks.
Right. Right.
Anyway.
So thank you, Dr. Brauman. Thank you for spending the time. We'll do this again. I wanted to send you a copy of this because I think you're just a fabulous explainer. And you've got such a rich story, and I'll get this to you and I'll get the transcript to you because, as I said to you, you deserve to write at least one and probably several books about all of your inventions and all of your activities and how you have helped America and the world to see things that they haven't seen before. And hopefully your latest insights will become important for solving the current situation that we have with COVID-19 and its variants. So thank you for spending your time with me.
Thanks, by the way.
I have to get on another call or I would continue this, but we'll do it again. Thank you very much. Have a good day today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And you too.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.